Hey guys, tonight we're taking a truly chilling journey back to ancient Greece, not to the democratic halls of Athens or the philosophical debates of Plato, but straight into the Spartan heartland. You're about to discover the brutal upbringing and training of a Spartan child, a system so relentlessly harsh, so utterly focused on forging warriors, that it redefined the very meaning of childhood. Forget your cozy nurseries and bedtime stories. For a Spartan, life was a test from birth, and failure meant a swift, unforgiving end. Frankly, you probably wouldn't survive your first hour, let alone your childhood. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me, where in the world are you tuning in from? And what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself suddenly transported to ancient Sparta, somewhere around the 6th or 5th century BCE. The air is crisp, the landscape rugged, and there's a palpable sense of austere discipline in every stone and every face you see. You're witnessing the arrival of a newborn Spartan child. A tiny, fragile bundle. But unlike almost any other society in history, this child's fate is not immediately sealed by its parents' love or hope. Instead, it rests in the hands of the state. The very first test for a Spartan child began immediately after birth. You would be taken, not to a warm crib, but to a council of the elders of the tribe, known as the Gerousia. These weren't kind, doting grandfathers. They were stern, experienced men, responsible for upholding the Spartan ideal of strength and perfection. Their task was to examine the newborn for any physical deformities, weaknesses, or signs of illness. Imagine them scrutinizing every limb, every breath, every tiny feature of the infant. It truly sucked to be judged before you could even cry. This wasn't a medical examination for health. It was an inspection for suitability. If the child was deemed healthy and robust, fit to potentially grow into a strong Spartan citizen and warrior, it would be returned to its parents to be raised for a few short years. But if the elders found the child to be puny, deformed, or sickly, deeming it unfit to be a future soldier, its fate was sealed. The child would be taken to the slopes of Mount Taygetus and left to die of exposure. This was not considered murder in Spartan society. It was seen as a mercy, a necessary act to maintain the strength and purity of the Spartan race, and to prevent a weak individual from becoming a burden on the state. Imagine the chilling silence of that mountain slope, the infant's cries fading into the wind. Abandoned by the very society it was born into, this brutal practice, though often exaggerated in later accounts, highlights the absolute, ruthless dedication of Sparta to its martial ideal. For those who passed this first, horrifying test, your early childhood, while spent with your mother, was still far from conventional. Spartan mothers were known for their strictness. Even with infants, you wouldn't be coddled or spoiled. You'd be accustomed to rough blankets, minimal comforts, and disciplined feeding schedules. Spartan babies were reportedly trained not to fear the dark, not to cry, and not to be fussy about food. This early conditioning was designed to instill hardiness and obedience, preparing you for the far more rigorous training that awaited you. It really sucked to have such a tough mom. The focus, even in these tender years, was already on your future as a warrior. Tales of valor, of heroic deeds, and the importance of dying for Sparta would fill your ears. Your play would likely involve rough and tumble games designed to build strength and resilience, rather than gentle, imaginative pursuits. Your infancy was merely a brief prelude to the state's full control. One common misconception is that all unfit Spartan babies were thrown off a cliff, the Aphatay, while Mount Taygetus was the general location. Historical sources, particularly Plutarch, suggest they were more often left in a chasm or ravine to perish from exposure, rather than being actively pushed off a cliff. Archaeological excavations in such areas have found some infant remains, but not in quantities that definitively confirm mass infanticide for all unfit babies, suggesting some variation or perhaps less widespread practice than the popular myth implies. Historians still debate the precise scale and location of this infanticide, but its existence as a practice is generally accepted. So, your very first moments as a Spartan child were marked by a brutal judgment, a literal test of your right to exist. Those who survived this horrifying selection faced a childhood designed not for nurturing, but for hardening, a stark preparation for the relentless, all-consuming training that would define the rest of their short, violent lives. This uncompromising dedication to the military ideal was the brutal foundation of your Spartan existence. Having miraculously passed the initial, chilling inspection at birth, your early childhood as a Spartan was still a far cry from the tender, sheltered upbringing most children experience. For the first 7 years, you remained in your mother's care. But even this period was an intense, highly disciplined preparation for the brutal life that awaited you. This phase, often romanticized as the last vestiges of family life, was in reality a rigorous boot camp run by your parents, making your brief childhood uniquely brutal. Imagine your home. It's not a place of soft comforts. Spartan mothers were legendary for their strictness and stern discipline, even with infants. You wouldn't be swaddled tightly or constantly rocked to sleep. Instead, you'd be accustomed to hard beds, simple clothes, and minimal toys. Spartan parents deliberately refrained from coddling their children. Believing that such softness would create weakness, you would be taught to endure discomfort from your earliest days, a subtle but pervasive form of hardening. It truly sucked to have such a tough start. Your feeding would be equally disciplined. You wouldn't be allowed to cry endlessly for food or demand constant attention. Spartan children were trained to eat what was given to them when it was given, and to accept hunger without complaint. This wasn't about starvation, but about instilling self-control and resilience against deprivation, preparing you for the meager rations of the Agoge. Imagine a baby being taught to control its hunger pangs. This early conditioning was designed to break any natural tendency towards self-indulgence or emotional weakness. Beyond basic care, your upbringing focused intensely on instilling Spartan values. You would be constantly exposed to tales of heroism, self-sacrifice, and unwavering loyalty to Sparta. Your mother, far from showering you with affection, would teach you that returning from battle with your shield or on it, meaning dead. Carried on your shield was the ultimate glory. You would learn to value courage, discipline, and the collective good of the state above all individual desires or fears. This indoctrination, beginning almost in the cradle, shaped your entire world view. Your play would be rough, designed to build physical strength, agility, and a tolerance for pain. You might engage in wrestling, running, and mock fights with other children, often without supervision from adults who would intervene to stop injuries. The goal was to foster competitiveness and resilience, preparing you for the more formal, brutal contests of the Agoge. Imagine your scraped knees and bruised shins as badges of honor, rather than reasons for tears. One common misconception is that Spartan children had no childhood at all. While vastly different from modern childhood, these early years with their mothers were indeed a period of play and learning, albeit highly structured and purposeful. The Spartans understood that some foundational development needed to occur before the formal state training began, but they ensured this period served the ultimate goal of producing warriors. Historians still debate the precise balance between maternal influence and state control during these early years, often relying on later Roman accounts that might exaggerate Spartan severity. The Spartan system actively encouraged physical robustness and indifference to pain. You would be taught not to cry, not to complain, and to endure discomfort without showing weakness. This was reinforced not just by your parents, but by older children and the community. Any display of softness would be met with scorn, driving you to suppress natural emotional responses in favor of a hardened, stoic demeanor. This early emotional repression was a crucial and brutal part of your preparation. Furthermore, interactions with your father, if he was a full Spartan citizen, would be limited. He would spend most of his time in communal barracks, training, eating, and living with his fellow warriors. He would visit you and your mother primarily for procreation, reinforcing the idea that your family unit was secondary to the state. This distant parental figure further emphasized that your ultimate loyalty belonged to Sparta, not to your individual kin. So, your first 7 years as a Spartan child, while spent within the family home, were an intense, relentless period of conditioning. Your parents, acting as agents of the state, systematically stripped away softness, instilled iron discipline, and forged a nascent warrior spirit within you. This was a profoundly brutal and unforgiving childhood, preparing you for the even harsher realities that awaited you in Agoge, where the state would take full, uncompromising control at the tender age of 7. Your brief, disciplined childhood comes to an abrupt end. You are ripped from your mother's side and thrust into the Agoge, the Spartan state-sponsored training system that would consume the rest of your youth. This wasn't just a school, it was a brutal, dehumanizing initiation into a life of collective hardship and absolute obedience, marking the true beginning of your brutal upbringing and training. Imagine that day, you, a small child, are marched away from the only home you've ever known, perhaps clutching a meager bundle of clothes. Your mother, stoic as all Spartan women were trained to be, might watch silently, knowing the separation was necessary, even sacred. For Sparta, you would be grouped with other boys your age, known as a bawa or herd, and placed under the charge of an older, experienced Spartan citizen, the paidonomos boy herder, who wielded absolute authority, including the power of life and death over his charges. It truly sucked to be herded like cattle. Your new home was the barracks. Forget individual beds or privacy. You would sleep on hard mats made of reeds, gathered yourself from the Eurotas River. Your clothing would be minimal, a single cloak, often thin and worn, even in winter. There would be no shoes, even in the cold, forcing your feet to toughen and adapt to the rugged terrain. The Spartan belief was that enduring cold and discomfort would strengthen the body and harden the spirit, making you impervious to hardship. The focus of the Agoge was not academic learning in the traditional sense. While you would learn basic literacy for military commands and essential documents, the vast majority of your day was dedicated to physical conditioning and martial arts. You'd engage in constant running, wrestling, boxing, and gymnastics. These weren't gentle exercises. They were brutal, competitive, and designed to push your body to its absolute limits, fostering strength, endurance, and aggressive combat instincts. Injuries were common, but complaints were met with scorn or punishment. Discipline was paramount and enforced with a literal iron fist. The paidonomos and older boys who served as instructors and overseers wielded whips and canes without hesitation. Any perceived weakness, disobedience, slowness, or even a tearful display would be met with swift and painful physical punishment. The goal was to instill absolute, unquestioning obedience and an utter indifference to pain. You learn to suppress every natural human instinct for comfort and self-preservation. It really sucked to learn through pain. Your relationships with your peers were complex. You lived, trained, ate, and slept side by side with your bawa. This constant communal living fostered intense camaraderie and loyalty within your group. You learned to rely on your comrades for survival, forging bonds that would last a lifetime and be paramount in battle. However, it also bred fierce competition and internal rivalries. As you constantly vied for recognition and avoided being seen as the weakest link, one common misconception is that the Agoge was entirely focused on physical training, while physical prowess was central. It also included a significant element of moral and civic education. Boys were taught to respect elders, obey laws, and uphold Spartan values. They learned to speak concisely and pointedly, the origin of the word laconic. They were encouraged to engage in debates and answer questions intelligently, but always with brevity and wit. This intellectual training, though secondary to physical conditioning, was crucial for producing well-rounded, disciplined citizens, not just mindless brutes. Historians still debate the precise balance between physical and intellectual training in the Agoge, with some scholars arguing for a more nuanced curriculum than popular legend suggests. The younger boys were also subjected to a system of mentorship by older Spartans. An older warrior would often adopt a younger boy, guiding him, disciplining him, and serving as a role model. While this could provide some emotional connection in an otherwise cold environment, it also created a system where older boys and men had significant control over the younger ones, sometimes leading to abusive situations, though official Spartan rhetoric emphasized honorable mentorship. So, entering the Agoge at age 7 was a terrifying and transformative experience. You were stripped of your childhood, your family, and your individuality, and plunged into a world of relentless physical training, brutal discipline, and constant competition. This initial phase of your brutal Spartan upbringing forged the very foundation of your existence, preparing you not just for warfare, but for a life utterly defined by hardship and unwavering service to the state. As you progressed through the Agoge, the physical demands intensified, transforming your young body into a hardened instrument of war. This wasn't just exercise, it was a relentless, often painful, physical training regimen designed to push you to the absolute limits of endurance and resilience, making your upbringing undeniably brutal. Imagine your daily routine. You would be constantly engaged in a grueling cycle of physical activity. Running was fundamental. You'd run barefoot over rugged terrain, rocky paths, uneven ground, through brush, for miles, day after day, regardless of the weather. This wasn't for leisure. It was to build incredible stamina, toughen your feet, and prepare you for the relentless marches of Spartan hoplites. Your feet would be a mass of calluses and scars, impervious to discomfort, but a testament to constant wear and tear. It truly sucked to have permanently aching feet. Then came the combat training. You'd be taught to wrestle, box, and engage in various forms of hand-to-hand combat. These weren't gentle sports. They were fierce, competitive contests, often without rules or protective gear. The goal was to develop brute strength, tactical cunning, and an utter indifference to pain. You would be expected to fight until exhaustion or until one opponent was clearly defeated, often resulting in cuts, bruises, and broken bones. Your body would be a constant landscape of fresh injuries and healing scars. a visible record of your daily ordeal. The Spartans also incorporated gymnastics and various forms of acrobatics into your training, designed to improve agility, flexibility, and coordination. Imagine performing complex maneuvers, often with minimal clothing, under the watchful, critical eyes of your instructors. Any sloppiness or weakness would be met with swift punishment, pushing you to perfect every movement through repetition and sheer will. Beyond these organized exercises, your body was also constantly tested by environmental exposure. You continued to wear a single, thin cloak even in winter, teaching you to endure the cold. You slept on hard beds. You were encouraged and even forced to bathe in cold rivers, even in the depths of winter. This constant exposure to discomfort was a deliberate strategy to harden your body and mind, making you resilient to the privations of campaigning and the harsh realities of warfare. It really sucked to be perpetually cold. This physical hardening extended to your endurance against pain. The Spartans believed that a warrior must be able to endure physical suffering without flinching or complaining. This was reinforced not just by the lack of comfort, but by the constant threat of physical discipline. You learned to suppress cries of pain, to push through exhaustion, and to ignore discomfort, cultivating an almost inhuman stoicism that would serve you well on the battlefield. One common misconception is that Spartan training focused solely on brute strength. While strength was important, their system emphasized endurance, agility, and tactical discipline equally. A Spartan hoplite was expected to march for days, fight in a disciplined formation, and endure prolonged combat, all of which required exceptional stamina and mental fortitude. Not just raw power, historians still meticulously studied the various components of the Agoge, trying to piece together a comprehensive picture of their physical curriculum based on fragmentary ancient accounts and archaeological evidence. Furthermore, competition was a pervasive element of your physical training. You would be constantly pitted against your peers, encouraged to outperform them, to prove your superiority. This fierce rivalry, while fostering excellence, also meant that every training session was a contest, every exercise a battle for dominance, adding another layer of psychological pressure to the physical strain. You were not just training. You were constantly proving yourself. The ultimate goal of this relentless physical regimen was to forge a body that was not only incredibly strong and resilient, but also perfectly adapted to the demands of hoplite warfare. Your muscles would be lean and powerful, your bones dense and hardened, and your stamina almost limitless. But this perfection came at an immense cost, turning your youth into a continuous cycle of pain, exhaustion, and forced endurance, truly defining the brutal nature of your Spartan upbringing. Even as your body was forged into a formidable instrument through relentless physical training, your Spartan upbringing was simultaneously applying an equally brutal pressure on another fundamental human need, food and nourishment. You were deliberately kept in a state of controlled hunger, not due to scarcity, but as a deliberate pedagogical tool, ensuring you developed resilience, resourcefulness, and an utter indifference to physical deprivation. Imagine mealtime in the Agoge. Forget plentiful portions or varied dishes. Your diet would be Spartan indeed, plain, simple, and notoriously meager. The primary staple was a thick, dark barley, gruel, or porridge, perhaps supplemented with some cheese, figs, or a few olives. Meat was a rare luxury, reserved for special occasions or religious sacrifices. This wasn't because Sparta lacked food. It was a deliberate policy to keep you constantly slightly hungry, pushing your body and mind to endure discomfort. It truly sucked to be perpetually hungry. This deliberate underfeeding served several crucial purposes. Firstly, it fostered hardiness and resilience. By accustoming you to perpetual hunger, the Spartans ensured you would not be weakened by deprivation on military campaigns. You would learn to fight and march effectively on minimal sustenance, making you a far more formidable and adaptable soldier. This wasn't about weight loss. It was about conditioning your body to perform optimally under duress. Secondly, and perhaps most infamously, it fostered resourcefulness and stealth. Because your official rations were insufficient, you were expected to supplement your diet by stealing food. This wasn't considered a crime in the traditional sense, but rather a vital skill. The crime was not in the stealing itself, but in getting caught. If you were caught, the punishment wasn't for theft, but for your clumsiness and lack of cunning. Imagine having to sneak past watchful eyes, perhaps even your instructors, to snatch a loaf of bread or a few vegetables, knowing that if you failed, a brutal lashing awaited you. This brutal training honed your stealth, quick thinking, and ability to operate independently behind enemy lines. Skills essential for a warrior society that relied on espionage and surprise. It really sucked to be taught how to steal by a whip. The most famous example of this was the Cleon's table, or the black broth melazomos. This was a legendary Spartan soup made from boiled pig's legs, blood, and vinegar. It was notoriously unpalatable to outsiders, but Spartans were expected to consume it without complaint. Imagine a thick, dark, bloody concoction that was designed more for sustenance and discipline than for taste. This was the epitome of their austere diet, a tool for hardening, not enjoyment. This constant state of hunger and the need to secretly acquire food created a pervasive undercurrent of tension in your daily life. You were constantly on the lookout for opportunities, constantly testing your stealth and cunning. It taught you to be perpetually wary, to observe your surroundings keenly, and to act decisively, all vital military skills, but learned through the gnawing discomfort of an empty stomach. One common misconception is that all Spartan children were severely malnourished to the point of being sickly, while their diet was meager. It was generally designed to provide enough calories for basic function, albeit with a focus on specific macronutrients for energy and resilience. The black broth, despite its reputation, likely provided crucial protein and iron. The goal was to keep them lean and hungry, not to deliberately starve them into illness, as a sick child would be useless to the state. Historians still debate the precise nutritional content of the Spartan diet, often inferring it from archaeological evidence of their physical stature and health, which generally showed them to be robust, albeit heavily muscled. Furthermore, this extreme dietary discipline instilled a profound indifference to luxury and comfort. You would learn to scorn rich foods and elaborate meals, seeing them as weaknesses that softened the body and mind. This asceticism was a core Spartan value, ensuring that wealth and indulgence would never distract a Spartan warrior from his duty to the state. You were trained to find satisfaction not in pleasure, but in endurance and discipline. So your experience with food in the Agoge was profoundly brutal. You were deliberately kept hungry, forced to steal to supplement your meager rations, and taught to consume unpalatable foods without complaint. This wasn't just about feeding your body, it was a psychological weapon, forging in you an iron will, an unwavering resourcefulness, and a deep-seated indifference to physical deprivation, all in service of Sparta's relentless military machine. Even as your perpetually hungry stomach and toughened body were being forged in the Agoge, the Spartan system applied its most pervasive and chilling tool, iron discipline. Enforced by the ever-present whip, this wasn't just about punishment, It was a systematic, brutal method of psychological conditioning, designed to strip away your individuality and instill absolute, unquestioning obedience. This relentless, physical enforcement of discipline made your upbringing undeniably brutal. Imagine the constant tension that permeated every moment of your day in the barracks. Your instructors, the paidonomos, and older boys who acted as prefects were constantly watching, assessing, and ready to mete out punishment for any infraction. A moment of weakness, a visible flinch of pain, a delayed response to a command, or even a simple tear could result in immediate, painful retribution. There was no escaping their gaze, no moment of true relaxation. It truly sucked to be constantly under threat. The primary tool of this discipline was the lash, usually a whip made of leather or braided reeds. Beatings were not rare occurrences, they were a commonplace, expected part of your education. You would be beaten for sloppiness in training, for disobedience, for failing to endure discomfort, for getting caught stealing, as discussed in the previous chapter. The failure to steal successfully was the crime, not the act itself. The pain would be sharp, searing, and humiliating. Delivered publicly to serve as a lesson for both you and your peers, imagine the sting, the burning sensation across your back or legs, knowing that showing any sign of weakness would only lead to further punishment. This constant physical discipline served several critical purposes. Firstly, it instilled absolute, unquestioning obedience to authority. You learned to respond instantly to commands, to suppress your own desires and fears in favor of collective action. This was paramount for hoplite warfare, where the disciplined formation of the shield wall was everything. A single disobedient soldier could break the formation and lead to catastrophic defeat. Secondly, it cultivated indifference to pain. By constantly subjecting you to physical discomfort and lashings, the Spartans aimed to desensitize you. You were taught to internalize pain, to endure it without flinching, without crying, without complaining. This meant that on the battlefield, you would theoretically be able to push through wounds that would incapacitate a lesser man, fighting until your last breath. It really sucked to be trained not to feel beyond the formal lashings. Older boys in the Agoge also had the authority to discipline younger ones. This created a hierarchical system of enforcement, where the brutal lessons of obedience and endurance were passed down through the ranks. You would both endure beatings and, as you grew older, inflict them, perpetuating the cycle of harsh discipline. This embedded the system of control deep within the very fabric of the boys' lives. One common misconception is that this brutal discipline was purely sadistic, while undoubtedly cruel. The Spartans viewed it as a necessary evil, a vital tool for forging the perfect warrior and citizen. They believed that such rigorous hardening was the only way to ensure the survival and superiority of their state, which was constantly reliant on its military strength to control its vast Helot slave population. Historians still debate the ethical implications of the Agoge's harshness, contrasting its military effectiveness with its profound human cost. Perhaps the most infamous example of this disciplinary extreme was the Cryptia, which we will touch on later in more detail, but it was an ultimate test of stealth, survival, and brutal obedience, where the discipline extended to lethal acts against others. But even before that, the annual ritual of diamastagosis, the public flogging of boys at the altar of Artemis Orthia, exemplifies the extreme lengths to which the Spartans would go to instill resilience and indifference to pain. Boys would compete to endure the most lashes without crying out, sometimes even dying from the ordeal. This was not just punishment, It was a public spectacle of endurance, a chilling display of Spartan resolve. So, your daily life in the Agoge was defined by the pervasive presence of physical discipline. The whip was not just an instrument of punishment, it was a constant teacher, shaping your body and mind into a vessel of absolute obedience and unwavering endurance. This relentless, physical enforcement of discipline was a defining, brutal aspect of your Spartan upbringing, ensuring you became the ultimate warrior, but at the cost of your individual freedom and your natural human response to pain, while the physical rigors and brutal discipline of the Agoge forged your body into a weapon. The Spartan system also cultivated a different, more insidious set of skills, resourcefulness, and stealth, often learned through the chilling practice of theft. This wasn't about petty crime. It was a deliberate, brutal, pedagogical tool designed to hone your cunning and survival instincts, transforming you into a master of subterfuge. Imagine your perpetually rumbling stomach. Your official rations in the Agoge were deliberately meager, just enough to keep you alive but never truly sated. This wasn't an oversight. It was a calculated strategy to force you to seek out additional food. Your instructors wouldn't provide it. Instead, you were expected to steal. This wasn't just tolerated, it was encouraged. The catch: the crime wasn't in the act of stealing, but in getting caught. If you were discovered, the punishment would be swift and severe, not for the theft itself, but for your clumsiness and lack of cunning. It truly sucked to be disciplined for being a bad thief. This brutal expectation forced you to develop razor-sharp senses and unparalleled stealth. You'd learn to observe your surroundings with meticulous detail, identifying weak points in storerooms, anticipating the movements of guards or older boys, and recognizing opportunities to snatch a piece of bread, a few olives, or a bit of cheese. You'd learn to move silently in the dark, to blend into shadows, and to act decisively when an opening presented itself. This was a direct, practical application of the cunning and initiative that would be invaluable on the battlefield, especially for scouting, foraging behind enemy lines, or launching surprise attacks. The constant threat of punishment for getting caught instilled a profound sense of self-reliance. You couldn't rely on anyone else. If you were hungry, it was your responsibility to use your wits and stealth to feed yourself. This fostered a fiercely independent spirit, a readiness to operate alone and under pressure, a trait highly valued in a warrior society that emphasized individual courage within a collective framework. Consider the psychological toll of this constant low-level deceit. You were perpetually on edge, always looking for opportunities, always weighing the risk of discovery against the gnawing pangs of hunger. This created a heightened state of awareness, a constant alertness that would serve you well in combat, but also contributed to a pervasive underlying tension in your daily life. You couldn't truly relax, as every moment was a potential test of your cunning. It really sucked to be a child, constantly plotting how to get your next meal. One famous, though likely apocryphal, anecdote illustrating this practice is of a Spartan boy who stole a fox and hid it under his cloak. When questioned, he allowed the fox to gnaw at his insides rather than reveal the theft, dying with a stoic expression, while probably exaggerated. This story powerfully conveys the Spartan ideal of enduring pain and maintaining secrecy, even to the death, illustrating the extreme nature of the stealing aspect of their training. Historians still debate the extent to which these stories are factual versus allegorical, but they certainly reflect Spartan values. This particular training element also instilled a deep understanding of human weakness and opportunity. by learning to exploit lax security or a moment of inattention. You gained insight into how to identify and exploit vulnerabilities in others, a crucial skill for a warrior who would one day face cunning enemies. You learned that vigilance was paramount, and even the smallest oversight could lead to severe consequences. Furthermore, the act of successfully stealing and feeding yourself without getting caught would provide a powerful sense of accomplishment and validation. It was a clear demonstration that you possessed the cunning and self-reliance necessary to survive in a harsh world. A critical step in your transformation into a formidable Spartan warrior. So, the Spartan decision to deliberately underfeed you and encourage theft was a brutal but highly effective pedagogical tool. It pushed you to the brink of hunger, forcing you to develop invaluable skills of stealth, resourcefulness, and self-reliance. This constant cycle of deprivation, cunning, and risk was a defining aspect of your upbringing, ensuring you became not just a physically powerful warrior, but a master of survival and subterfuge, ready for the relentless demands of the Spartan state, even as your body was hardened by physical discipline and your mind sharpened by cunning theft. Your Spartan upbringing culminated in perhaps its most chilling and controversial practice, the crypteia. This wasn't a formal combat exercise. It was a secret, brutal ritual of initiation and control, designed to instill absolute ruthlessness and to maintain the Spartan state's iron grip over its vast Helot slave population. Imagine yourself as a young man, a Spartan, a youth between 18 and 19 years old, on the cusp of becoming a full citizen and warrior. While your peers might be preparing for military maneuvers, you are chosen for the crypteia. This was a secret police force, a covert operation conducted by the most promising Spartan youths. You would be sent out, armed only with a dagger and minimal provisions, into the surrounding countryside, specifically into areas inhabited by the Helots. It truly sucked to be a hunter of men. Your mission was terrifyingly simple: to survive by stealth and to kill Helots. You would live off the land, foraging or stealing what you needed, honing your skills in subterfuge and self-sufficiency, but the primary objective was to eliminate any Helot, particularly the strongest, most intelligent, or most rebellious. Imagine stalking the fields at night, hiding in shadows, listening for the quiet sounds of Helot encampments. The psychological burden of hunting unarmed people, not in open battle, but in cold blood, was immense. The Helots were the enslaved population of Laconia and Messenia. Vastly outnumbering the Spartans, their constant subjugation was the bedrock of Spartan society, allowing Spartans to dedicate their lives entirely to military training. The crypteia was a brutal, though clandestine, tool for maintaining this social order through terror by periodically eliminating potential leaders or strong individuals among the Helots. The Spartans aimed to prevent rebellions and suppress any aspirations for freedom. It really sucked to be part of a terror regime. This secret slaughter was not openly acknowledged by the Spartans themselves, or at least not celebrated as a formal military action. It was a dirty, necessary business, performed in the shadows, away from the heroic ideals of hoplite warfare. This clandestine nature added to its chilling effectiveness. Helots lived in constant fear, never knowing when a shadowy Spartan youth might emerge from the darkness to claim their life. The crypteia also served as a final, brutal test for you, the aspiring Spartan warrior. It forced you to confront the ultimate act of violence, killing a human being in cold blood. Without the adrenaline or justification of open combat, it stripped away any lingering civilian morality, completing your transformation into a ruthless, utterly obedient instrument of the state. You learned to suppress empathy, to view certain groups of people as mere obstacles to be eliminated for the greater good of Sparta. This psychological hardening was essential for a society built on the perpetual suppression of a vast enslaved population. One fascinating and particularly disturbing detail is that the very existence of the crypteia has been a subject of intense academic debate among historians, while ancient sources like Plutarch and Aristotle describe it. Some modern scholars question the extent or the precise nature of the crypteia, suggesting it might have been an exaggerated or ritualized practice rather than a widespread annual hunt. However, the consistent descriptions from multiple sources, combined with the known Spartan obsession with maintaining control over the helots, strongly suggest that something akin to the crypteia indeed existed. Even if its scale is still debated, historians still meticulously analyze the ancient texts, seeking to reconcile the often contradictory accounts and understand the full implications of this brutal practice. Furthermore, the crypteia might have involved not just murder, but also espionage. You might have been tasked with gathering intelligence on helot settlements, identifying their leaders, or understanding their discontent. This combination of covert observation and lethal action made you a terrifyingly effective tool of state control, ensuring that few secrets remained hidden from the Spartan ruling class. So, your experience in the crypteia was the ultimate, brutal culmination of your Spartan upbringing. You were transformed from a disciplined youth into a ruthless instrument of state terror, forced to commit acts of chilling violence in the shadows. The secret, deadly rituals solidified your obedience, honed your cunning, and ensured the brutal maintenance of Sparta's social order, all at the cost of your innocence and perhaps a piece of your very soul. Even as your individual body and mind were forged in the crucible of the Agoge, enduring brutal discipline, relentless hunger, and the chilling lessons of the crypteia, a powerful and often paradoxical force began to define your existence. Comradeship, the shared suffering, the constant presence of your peers, and the unwavering reliance on each other in a hostile world created bonds of loyalty and affection unlike any found elsewhere, a profound strength born from the brutal reality of your Spartan upbringing. Imagine your barracks. You sleep on hard reeds, share meager meals, and train until exhaustion, always side by side with the same group of boys, your Siskanoy messmates or Bawa herd. From the tender age of 7, these boys became your new family. Your biological family, though not forgotten, was secondary. It was with these comrades that you faced every beating, every hungry night, every grueling exercise. This constant, inescapable proximity fostered an unparalleled sense of mutual dependence and solidarity. You learned to trust them with your life, for in the Agoge, your survival literally depended on the strength and resilience of your immediate group. It truly sucked to only feel connection through shared pain. This camaraderie was not built on shared laughter or comfortable companionship. It was forged in the fires of shared hardship. When one of you faltered during a run, others would push you on. When one faced a beating, the others watched in stoic silence, perhaps sharing a glance of understanding that solidified your shared fate. You learned to understand each other without words, to read the subtle signs of exhaustion, fear, or determination in your comrade's eyes. This silent understanding, born from shared suffering, created an unbreakable bond that transcended individual personalities. The Spartan system deliberately fostered these bonds, recognizing that the strength of their army lay not in individual heroism, but in the unwavering cohesion of the phalanx. To fight effectively in this tight formation, where every man's shield protected his neighbor, absolute trust and loyalty to your comrades were essential. The Agoge was designed to build this loyalty from the ground up, turning individual boys into inseparable units. Your life on the battlefield would depend on the man to your left and the man to your right. This intense bonding also extended to older youths and men who served as mentors or lovers, Aristai and Iramenoi. While the precise nature of these relationships is a subject of academic debate, they often involved an older, experienced warrior guiding and inspiring a younger boy, not just in military prowess, but also in virtue and discipline. These relationships, whether platonic or physical, as was common in many parts of ancient Greece, though with specific Spartan nuances, further solidified the bonds within the Agoge, creating a complex web of mentorship, loyalty, and affection that reinforced the system. It really sucked to have your deepest bonds also be part of your training. The competition within the Agoge, while fierce, also served to strengthen the group. You competed against each other not to tear each other down, but to push each other to greater heights. Every race, every wrestling match, every test of endurance was a chance to prove your worth. Not just to your instructors, but to your peers, earning their respect and reinforcing your place within the collective. You were constantly striving to be the best for your group, not just over your group. When you finally became a full Spartan warrior, a homoios peer, these bonds formed in the Agoge remained paramount. You would eat, live, and often fight alongside the same men for the rest of your life, sharing communal messes, syssitia, and campaigning together. Your loyalty to your messmates often superseded even your loyalty to your biological family, a testament to the enduring power of your shared, brutal upbringing. One common historical misconception is that Spartan society was utterly devoid of human emotion or familial love. While their system emphasized austerity and state loyalty, it channeled human bonding into specific, militarily advantageous forms. The intense camaraderie fostered in the Agoge, the love for their city, and the strict adherence to their values all stemmed from deeply felt emotions. Albeit expressed in a manner very different from modern society, historians still actively research the precise nature of these emotional bonds, particularly the concept of philia, brotherly love among Spartan warriors. Using textual evidence and comparative anthropological studies to understand its social function. Furthermore, this intense communal living and shared suffering could also lead to unique forms of psychological resilience. By constantly facing hardship together, you learned that you were not alone in your struggle. The collective endurance provided a sense of strength and purpose, helping you to cope with the individual pain and fear that were constant companions in the Agoge. You literally drew strength from the shared misery. So, your Spartan upbringing, while physically and psychologically brutal, paradoxically created some of the strongest bonds imaginable: the shared hunger, the communal barracks, the relentless physical discipline, and the terrifying tests of stealth and ruthlessness all served to forge an unbreakable camaraderie among you and your peers. This profound strength in suffering, this unwavering loyalty to your comrades, was a defining aspect of your existence, ensuring that even in the most brutal moments, you were never truly alone, but part of a fearsome, unbreakable collective. You've survived the chilling judgment at birth, the austere discipline of your early childhood, the brutal initiation into the Agoge, and the relentless physical, mental, and ethical trials that followed. Now, as the sounds of the barracks fade into the background and the ghost of the whip no longer stings your back, You have achieved the ultimate Spartan aspiration. You are a full Spartan citizen and warrior. But this pinnacle of achievement came at an immense, pervasive cost, a life of profound limitation and no true personal freedom. This realization made your adulthood, despite its prestige, ultimately brutal. Imagine yourself now, a homoios appear, a full and equal member of the Spartan warrior elite. Perhaps in your 30s or 40s, you have earned the right to sit in the Syssitia, the communal mess hall, eating and living with your lifelong comrades. You have a plot of land, worked by helots, providing your sustenance. You participate in the Appella, the citizens' assembly, voting on laws and war. You are the embodiment of the Spartan ideal, perfectly disciplined, physically formidable, and utterly dedicated to the state. It truly sucked to be free, but still utterly controlled. However, your life, even as a full citizen, remained utterly controlled by the state. From the moment of your birth, every aspect of your existence had been meticulously engineered to serve Sparta. Your education, your diet, your physical training, even your social bonds, all were designed to produce the perfect soldier. And now, as an adult, that control did not lessen. It merely shifted its form. Firstly, your marriage was not a matter of personal choice or romantic love. While you might be permitted to kidnap your bride in a ritualized ceremony, the state encouraged you to marry to produce strong, healthy children for Sparta, even after marriage. You were largely separated from your wife. You continued to live in the barracks with your messmates, visiting your wife only secretly, in the dark, and usually for the purpose of procreation. This ensured your primary loyalty remained with your fellow warriors and the state, not with your family. Imagine having a wife and children, yet living apart from them. Your emotional life deliberately suppressed for the sake of martial discipline. It really sucked to have your family life dictated by military needs. Your economic life was also entirely dictated by the state. You were assigned a kleros, a plot of land worked by helots. This land was not truly yours to buy, sell, or inherit freely. It belonged to the state and was allotted to you to support your participation in the Syssitia and your military service. You couldn't engage in trade, crafts, or any profession other than being a warrior and a citizen. The pursuit of wealth was discouraged, seen as a corrupting influence that would divert your focus from military excellence. You lived a life of deliberate austerity, designed to prevent any personal desires from undermining your dedication to Sparta. Your social interactions were similarly constrained. Your primary social sphere remained your Syssitia, where you ate, drank, and debated with your fellow Spartans. While you were part of the Appella, public discourse was typically brief and to the point. Reflecting your laconic training, there was little room for individual expression, eccentricities, or dissenting opinions. Conformity to the Spartan ideal was paramount, and those who deviated too far would face social pressure or even ostracism. The state also exercised profound control over your physical body. Even in adulthood, you were expected to maintain your physical prowess, to continue training, and to always be ready for war. Your body was not merely your own. It was a tool of the state, perpetually on standby for military campaigns. You could be called to arms at any moment, sent to distant lands, or ordered to suppress a helot rebellion. All without question, your very existence was dedicated to Sparta's military dominance. One common misconception is that Spartan citizens were entirely equal in practice. While all homoioi shared equal legal status and participated in the Syssitia, disparities in wealth derived from the productivity of their kleros and helots and influence certainly existed. Furthermore, the role of the ephors, the annually elected magistrates, held immense power over every Spartan citizen, able to command even the kings, embodying the state's absolute authority over individual lives. Historians still meticulously analyze the intricate power dynamics between the Spartan kings, the Gerousia, the Apella, and the Ephors to understand the precise mechanisms of Spartan governance and its impact on individual liberty. The psychological toll of this constant, lifelong control was immense. You were trained to suppress fear, pain, and individual desire. But this internal repression would inevitably lead to a rigid, often humorless existence. The external image of the Stoics' unbreakable Spartan masked an internal life, perhaps devoid of genuine joy, personal fulfillment, or emotional spontaneity. Your individuality was sacrificed on the altar of the collective. It really sucked to be a perfect machine with no heart. Furthermore, the Spartan society was built on the perpetual suppression of the helots. This meant that the Spartans lived in a constant state of military readiness, always aware of the potential for rebellion from the vastly outnumbered enslaved population. This perpetual tension, this underlying fear of revolt, contributed to the rigid control and austerity of Spartan life, ensuring that even as a full citizen, you were forever defined by your role as an oppressor. So, your adulthood as a Spartan warrior, while the envy of many ancient Greeks for its discipline and military might, was a life of profound limitations. Your choice, your freedom, your very individuality were sacrificed from birth for the sake of the state's military dominance. This pervasive, unyielding control over every aspect of your existence, from your family to your finances, made being a Spartan citizen, despite its prestige, a truly brutal and ultimately unfree experience. You've completed your stark journey through the brutal upbringing and training of a Spartan child, and as the echoes of the Agoge's harsh discipline and the chilling silence of Mount Taygetus finally fade, a profound and unsettling truth remains. The Spartan ideal, while producing arguably the most formidable warriors of the ancient world, came at an unimaginable human cost, forging individuals of iron discipline, but robbing them of a fundamental human experience. Think about the sheer, relentless control that defined every moment of your Spartan life. From the horrifying judgment at birth, where your very right to exist was decided by a council of elders, to your forced entry into the barracks at age 7. Every aspect of your development was meticulously managed by the state. Your diet was meager, your clothing minimal, your comfort non-existent. There was no room for individual expression, no indulgence of personal desires, only unwavering dedication to the collective. Then consider the physical and psychological torment. Your body was a tool honed through brutal exercises, perpetual hunger, and frequent lashings. Designed to withstand pain without flinching, your mind was conditioned through deliberate underfeeding, strategic theft, and the chilling lessons of the Crypteia, transforming you into a ruthless, utterly obedient instrument of the state. This constant, pervasive suffering, designed to break and then rebuild you, left indelible scars that permeated every aspect of your being. And, perhaps most tragically, the sacrifice of personal freedom and individuality, the camaraderie forged in shared suffering, while powerful, was a bond built on necessity, not free choice. Your marriage was dictated by the state, your family life virtually non-existent, and your economic pursuits entirely curtailed. You were a perfectly engineered component of a military machine, powerful in your collective strength, yet utterly unfree as an individual, Your life was devoted to Sparta's survival, leaving little room for your own. Ultimately, the story of the Spartan child is a chilling testament to the extremes of social engineering in pursuit of military might. It reveals a society that prioritized collective strength and unwavering discipline above all else, forging warriors who were truly unbreakable on the battlefield, but at the profound cost of their personal lives, their emotional freedom, and perhaps a piece of their very soul. As you now drift into a deep, comforting sleep, let the echoes of Spartan discipline and the harshness of their barren landscape fade into the quiet background of history. You are safe in your own time, far removed from the brutal realities of the Agoge. May your dreams be peaceful, filled with the boundless possibilities that come with true self-determination and the freedom to pursue your own path. A stark contrast to the brutal truth we've explored tonight. And now, good night, and have sweet dreams.